I'm going to talk about database migration using Grate and Cake. Now, you've probably heard me talk about Cake, or the old guys here have heard me talk about Cake multiple times. It's a slightly new twist to it, okay? So I'll take you through that. First of all, where this all came about was at my company. So I'm employed by CrossLeak, which I should shout out there because they gave me the 5 days a year, roughly. There's no real hard and fast about it. Training time, and this was my first permie job for 15 years because I was a contractor for a long time. I thought, this is amazing, what am I going to do with my 5 days? Oh, I don't know. What do I want to learn? Oh, I don't want to do an Azure course. It just didn't click with me, and I want to do one of the other online courses. Joke. They just didn't click with me. I just didn't get excited about it, and I've tried a few things, but nothing really stuck. And then it kind of dawned on me. I'm always talking about junior developers. Well, start contributing to open source. Start, for one, building and giving back to the community, but also it's a great way to learn new things and see new technologies. And I thought, well, I should give that a go. And so I did. And there's two communities I've used a lot. Cake, as you heard me talk about at Chester Devs for probably about 10 years. Grate, you may have heard me talk about. It used to be called Knockout Roundhouse, which I'll come on to in a bit. I don't know if I've talked about that or not. Some of you probably have. But also was to keep in touch with coding, because my new role, I don't do a lot of coding. It's not my main job, but I don't want to lose contact with that either, because I need to see code, review code, and it would be fun to do something a little bit interesting. And so I did, and you know what, it was a real success. So if you're in a similar position, I really advise, have a play around with some open source stuff, give back to the community. I learned from it. GitHub Actions, which I might be late to the party there, a lot of you probably already have. But I hadn't used GitHub Actions before, the pipelines I had. I'd never published a new Git package before, and now I have. And I also got to know more about each tool and got involved with the community of each tool, which was rewarding. So I can recommend that. So I'm going to split this into two halves. We're going to talk about Grate, which is the database migration tool, and then I'll talk about Cake, which is the bit that I wrote to allow Grate to be run easily within the Cake ecosystem. So, Grate is this guy. I put the link on there, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, well, the link's at the top. So, Grate, there's all sorts of database migration systems. The one I'm probably most familiar with is Entity Framework, and I'm not going to knock Entity Framework and Entity Framework migrations. There's a guy here today who's taken over one of my projects and has got Entity Framework migrations quite heavily. It's nice. It's good. You inevitably end up writing SQL and saying, just run this SQL against the database for me. So it wasn't really good enough, and you end up with a big list of files, and it's not structured. And it's got lots of great, powerful features, but for me it was a little bit too magic, a little bit too messy. The magic is the thing that probably hit me most. I don't like magic within code. I like to know, if I do it like this, I understand why it's working. I don't want it to just do stuff. Grate isn't like that. Grate just uses plain old SQL. If you want a table, you create a SQL script that says create table. If you want to add data, you write your insert scripts. If you want to alter store procedure, you write an alter procedure script. I'll come on to exactly how that works. The history of it, do I come on to it? Oh no, history's next. It's great, actually, it's great. And it gives you an ability to version the database. That's the other thing, which crucially we don't often do. It does Entity Framework, and I know other tools do that, and I know there are other tools that are similar to Grate, but I don't care about that. I'm going to tell you about this. So the history is interesting. There was a Chuck Norris group of, that doesn't really come out very well, does it? A Chuck Norris group of repositories in GitHub. If you search in Chuck Norris in GitHub, you'll see all of these. Roundhouse being one of them. It's the only one actually I've worked with, but you can see you've got dropkick, warm-up, uppercut, powercut, side pop. There's a whole theme, right? Roundhouse was a thing that did the database migration. And that is where Grate has come from. So Grate is more or less 100% compatible, backwards compatible with Roundhouse. The guy, Eric, on the previous screen, he became the main maintainer of Roundhouse. It was, I think, the latest compatibility was SQL Server 2000. It did work with newer versions for SQL. But in order to get that up to date and update all the frameworks, he was using .NET Framework rather than .NET Core, all that sort of stuff. It was hard. So he decided, you know what, I'm going to rewrite this. And there's an issue in there that explains exactly why he did that. And he's written it almost 100% backwards compatible with Roundhouse. He's got a page to explain where the slight differences. So how does it work? It's based on these 3 script types: one-time scripts, anytime scripts, and every-time scripts. So the one-time scripts are things like create a table. So if you're going to run that script twice, you're going to get an error the second time. You're going to create a table once, okay? So these are your one-time scripts or insert scripts. You want to see the database, you'd put that in one-time script. If you try and run it a second time, Grate will say, no, you can't do that. You've already run that once against this database to prevent errors or data corruption. The anytime scripts mean exactly that. They could be run anytime. They're only run whenever it's changed. So every time it runs, it stores the hash of the file and understands whether or not that file has changed since the last time you run it against this database and runs it if it needs to. And then every time script. So this is handy when you need a script to do a drop and insert data, or most commonly every time it's used for updating permissions. If you're doing like a grant execute to such and such a role for all procedures, for example, something along that side, or those lines. The other thing that's fundamental to it is the folders. That's really small. I hope you can see that. So we've got drop database, create database, up functions, views, sprocs, triggers, indexes, and permissions. Each folder then has a default script type. So drop database and create database, it'll do that automatically for you. But if you want to drop your database with a custom script or create a database with a custom script, you can drop a script in that folder and it will run it for you whenever it needs to do those two things. Up is probably the busiest one. So that is where your one-time scripts go. That's where your create database, for example, goes, or insert data. Functions, views, sprocs, triggers, and indexes are all anytime things, and they're all exactly what you would expect. So you put your store procedures and sprocs, functions and functions, and it executes them. And then permissions is an every time one. There are other ones because this is a very flexible system. So we've got before migration, after database, alter database, run after create database, run before up, run after first up, run after, anyway. Lots of other little folders that you can do to kind of put in between these things. So they all run in a fixed order. So if you need to do something slightly different, then it's got the flexibility for that. Yes, existing databases is something you're going to want to know. I've got a massive database. How on earth do I apply this to this? Well, it's up to you, really. You can either just say, right, okay, this database is at version 0. I'm going to start from now. You don't need to create all of your files in there. If you need to do an alter database, for example, then throw in an alter database script into the up. If you need to alter a store procedure, then throw in an alter store procedure into the sprocs folder and take it from there. If you do prefer to have all of your database in the folder structure, there used to be a tool in Roundhouse. I don't know if it exists in Grate, but you can use the SQL Server. Well, I'm a SQL Server guy. You can use the SQL Server Management Studio just to output all of your tables. I know you can do a similar thing with MySQL. I don't know about the others, but I'm sure similar things exist to output all of your scripts and then order them into those folders. Depends on your use case. Other things it does: versioning and auditing. So every database, there's a table in there. It tells you what version this database is at, and you can check in on that. You can have environment-specific scripts. So you might say in this environment, you want something to run slightly differently to whether there's a production or local, however you feel about that. Token replacement, he says use this with caution. He doesn't like that. And this is why I like the guy. He said he doesn't like that because that's then vendor lock-in. You're locked into my system of upgrading the database if you're using token replacement because I'm using my tokens and another system will not use it. It is incredibly configurable. And the nice thing is then, because the next question is, well, hang on a second, I've got a bunch of DBAs that are very cautious about how we update our production database. Well, you can run a dry run, and it'll output all the scripts. You do have to connect to the database, so you'd have to negotiate that. But you can connect to the database, run a dry run, and it says, here are all the scripts that need to run against this database to bring it up to the version in Git that you currently are executing against. Okay. Any questions there so far?
You said ordering. How do you do ordering in one folder? Is it like just numerically or alphabetically? Or?
So when I mean ordering, I mean these folders run in a particular order, but it's a very good point because in the up folder you want things to run in a specific order. So the typical way is you just prefix it with a number. 0001, 0002, and I'll show you that in the demo, which is next. Right. Pray to the demo gods. Let's see if this works. Okay, so this is a typical Grate folder. Ignore tools, I shouldn't do that. So in this SQL files folder, you should be able to see all that fairly well. You can see in the up folder I've got create table animals, nothing particularly special in there. Seed the animals, I'm doing an insert into the animals table. If you don't like my SQL, I'm not a SQL developer, sorry. That's my caveat. So, I've then got a view to say, create a view of that table. I've got a store procedure, get animals by species, passing species. And then because I'm querying on species and because it makes the demo more interesting, I've got an index so that we can optimize that incredibly small table. Okay, so to run it, so I'm using Visual Studio Code. It can run as a .NET tool. It can run just as an executable. You can run it as a, I think you can run it as a NuGet package now. There are multiple ways. You can use Chocolatey. Winget, I think, also gets it. I think. There are multiple ways. He's got a page on it to explain how you want to get it. I'm a .NET guy. I'm going to use the .NET tool. So create a new tool manifest, which is standard .NET stuff. And then again, standard .NET stuff. Install Grate. And there we go. That is now installed, so I'm going to run my Grate. So you can see that, can't you? So just .NET Grate executes the tool. I'm giving it a connection string here on the command line. Nothing to see here. I'm just connecting my local and integrated security and trust and certificate because I have a proper certificate on this computer. Files, I'm saying this is where you'll find the files. By default, that's in the same root. I don't like that. I like to have a specific place to put all this stuff. It keeps things neat. And I'm saying this is the version I want my database to be, 0.01. So, copy that onto the command line. And it's looking good so far. So, I haven't used silent mode, so it's going to ask me, it's going to prompt me every time I want to do something in case I run it accidentally. So yes, I do want it to do it. Oh, imagine that. Right, do you know why? I didn't clear everything down, did I? Let me delete the date. Oh, can I do? Tell you what. Right, this really is praying for the demo, guys. Let's see if I can do drop. And that should just drop the existing database first. Yes, look at that. Don't do that with your production database. All right, okay. So you know what might also not be working here is... Oh, no, it's okay. I don't always have SQL Server running. This is a new laptop with loads of resources, so I can actually have SQL Server. So there we go. It's gone through. It has, as you can see, let's go back to the beginning. It's removed the database. It's set everything up and given it a version. It's noticed that we don't have these folders. Ignore those. It's running my update scripts, running my view, running all the scripts basically, and then saying, there you go. Grate has grated your database. It used to say, Roundhouse has kicked your database. Which was obviously a lot cooler, but that's right. Should have had SQL Server open anyway because we want to connect to our database. Few here, but here is Grate demo. See here, you've got our table, as expected, animals. Also another load of other great databases, which I'll explain in tables, sorry, which I'll explain in a second. But let's just prove it. Sign up for dogs. There we go. Then these are the great specific tables. So you can see in here, first one here is really small. Can I increase that? Does that even zoom? It doesn't. That's really annoying. You can't see that. The people online can see that. So bad luck. But this says, this is the version, this was the date it was run, this is who ran it. The next one says, these are all the scripts that were run. It's actually got the full text of the script. Now, if you don't want to fill your database with that stuff, you can turn that off. And it's got the hash of the file. And then the last one is errors, which is empty, because we didn't get any errors, because we chopped the database. Okay, so that's the basic. Let's move on to the next step. That. Mix. Okay. So step 2, we're going to alter the database. So if you have a look in here now, I've gone in here and I have added a new column to my database. Shouldn't work. And I will prove it to you. Which now I'm doing this in real time feels a little redundant. So no difference to this. I'm not going to use the drop in this case, and I'm going to go with version 0.2.0. Normal stuff. Kick it, and it says, get lost, you can't do that. And explains why. Animal script has changed since last time it was run. By default, it's not allowed. You can override those defaults. You can say for these files, actually, I want to override it. So the default conditions of each folder don't have to be applied. The correct way to do it, of course, step 3, which is I've added a new script into my up folder saying alter tables, add pet name. One thing I will pause on here is what this doesn't have, and Entity Framework and some other things do have, is an automatic rollback. There are ways you can do that. I've worked in places before where you just DBA wouldn't let you submit a SQL file unless you gave it a rollback at the same time. It doesn't enforce any of that. This is kind of forwards only. So come back into the commands. Basically execute the same command again. Version 0.2.0. Now what you'll see actually while that's running is my changes in this one. This is fork, by the way, for Git client, which that's useless from this resolution. It's amazing. If you should check out fork. But the scripts effectively are. So I've added the alter. I've updated the view, because obviously a view you can update any time. You'll notice I've renamed that from create view to alter view. Obviously you have to do that first time. Same for store procedure. Index doesn't change. So, what are we doing for time? Not too bad. I'll run that again now. We now have pet name. And now if you look in here, I've got 3, hang on a second. Not that you can see it, but let's tidy it up anyway. I've got 3 entries here, so this is the version. Sorry for people online, but the top folder, the top line there is the version. You can see it's actually entered version 0.2.0 twice. The first time has a status of error. And now in the bottom row here, you can't see it, there is an entry for the error. And it's got the same ID as it has in the version table. And so you can actually see what was the script that ran and what was the error that it got. And then the log is just updated to say, these are the scripts that we've run for this particular run, and so on. So that's your history of your database. Keeps everything nice and sync. Because Grate is just text files, check it into Git. The normal Git rules apply. Multiple developers can work on it, merging and all the rest of it. You have to be a little bit careful with multiple developers, obviously with your up file. But I've not had any issues with that. And I have used it in multiple developer environments. So, back to the demo. So that was great. Any questions on Grate before we move on to the next section? Yeah.
Is there a way to get to analyse an existing database and create some of these scripts for you? So a bit like, I don't know if it still exists, but Visual Studio had something called DataDude about 15 years ago, and maybe do that sort of thing.
No. But what you can do, so no, there's nothing as clever as that will say this is what the database is. You can do, if you're running against an existing database, well, there's a couple of other things you can do that are completely unrelated to it, but you prompted me to say it. Is you can do things like a baseline, for example. So if you've got a database that already exists, let's say you restored it from backup, and you want to not execute any scripts against it, but you know the scripts in your Grate folder match this database that you just restored, you can say just do a baseline, and it'll just put a line in the table saying everything's done but won't execute any scripts, if you like, so it just kind of syncs the two. The other thing you can do, again completely unrelated, is you can, as part of your creation of this, you don't have to create an empty database. You can say, actually, here is a standard backup that I want to use. Restore this backup as you kick off, and it will restore the backup, and then it will compare the versions of what you coded to the versions of the backup, and away you go. Any other questions on Grate before I move on? I'll have more time for questions at the end. Excellent, because I want to hit half past so that I don't ruin the own rules. Okay. Back to presentation, and we'll talk about cake. Rachel Breeze, she was here a couple of last month, had a really good setup, which I'm not as good as that. Cake. Not something you eat, but there's their logo. So Cake at cakebuild.net is based in .net. It is a design-specific language, DSL, for, I would call it pipelines. And that's how I've always used it. Okay, so for, what's it say there? Compiling code, copying files, folders, running unit tests, compressing files, building NuGet packages. So everything you do in your pipeline. Okay. Yes, sorry, just working out where I talk about things. This is an example that you can't see. I'll show you a good example in a minute when I expand it. It will run locally on your local machine via either .NET or PowerShell. You can make it run in a Docker image. You can plug it into any pipeline that I've seen, because most pipelines will, at the very least, run PowerShell. I'm doubting myself now, but it also runs on Linux, so I'm sure that will cover it. I love Cake. It saved me an awful lot of time. My favourite example of Cake was one company that had their entire build pipeline in Team City, and it was something like 60 steps configured in Team City, which is, complex, etc., maybe amazing, I don't know. If you had an issue on step 45 and you've made a change and wanted to test that, you had to run through 45 steps in order to know whether your change had worked, and you had to run it on the server. You couldn't run it locally. And I know now, and it was all based in configuration. It wasn't based on files. Now, things have moved on since then. We have YAML files for all of your popular pipelines. Great. That's pipeline version alongside your code. Excellent. How do I run my YAML script locally and debug it? That isn't as easy. I know there are ways of doing it with Docker, etc., but it isn't as easy. And so this is why I like Cake. So I write all of my build logic in Cake. Just making sure I'm not jumping too far ahead. And then in my build pipeline, be it GitHub Actions or your DevOps, Jenkins, Team City, it says execute Cake. And that's all I have in that pipeline. And then it goes through. And it outputs into because Cake has plugins for all these things, and most of these pipelines actually have a plugin so you can execute Cake a little bit prettier than shoving in a execute PowerShell line. It means the logs that come out of Cake, like your tests, for example, you run your tests, you want your test fails to be presented in the right way in your pipeline console and UI. It'll do all that for you. It'll format the output, because all those pipelines generally do is they read the output that's coming from the console and they recognize, oh, that format means it's a test. Okay, I'll drive it over here so you can see all your failed tests. It does all that sort of stuff for you. So from a pipeline point of view, the output looks the same if it's running Cake as if it's run locally. Mostly, probably. I'm not 100% sure that's always true, but I've never had an issue with that, with any variations in it. If then I want to debug step 45, I can actually say quite easy, just alter the script on my local machine just to skip the first 45, or maybe I need step 1, 5 and 7 to run or something in order for 45 to execute. I can just configure it to do that. I can run it, and if need be, I can actually hit a debug, and I can actually put a breakpoint and actually see what on earth is going wrong with that. I can fiddle with it locally and I can execute it. Okay, the security permissions there, because if you then allow me to publish from my local computer to production, then that's obviously bad. But you must have a dev environment, right? So allow publishing from local to a dev environment makes that easy. And you have all the good development practices. Okay, so all the good ideas of trimming down your code into functions and separating them across files and having good organisation, Git hygiene, and all the rest of that stuff. Is all there. Cake is awesome, and it's underrated. There's not enough people using it, in my opinion. Then we come to where I'm getting to with Cake. There's lots of extensions. You can build your own extension. For example, I built an extension once because it didn't do a deploy to a folder on the network out of the box, because obviously that's a very Windows thing, and it's not a Windows tool. So I built an extension that would do that. My pipeline said, right, build the extension, now use that extension, and now run the normal pipeline. Other things it has: 7-zip, AWS EC2, CSV helper, Docker, ESLint, Gitter, NPM, Terraform, Vault, WinSCP, YAML, Yarn, and of course, cake.grate, which is where I'm getting to. Anything else I need to say there? So, cake.grate is what I did for this. The whole point of the talk was I built the extension cake.grate. I got in touch with all the Cake people. I got in touch with Grate. I said, this is what I want to do. They gave me some guidelines. This is how you plug it in. This is how you do it. And I went off and I created cake.grate. URL in the bottom there, github.com/. Now you'll see that what it is in is cake-config rather than Fran Hoey. Because the way Cake like it is, if you're going to contribute to them, they've actually got an organisation called Cake-contrib, where they would like you to put the plugins, so that if you got bored of it and stopped maintaining it at some point, then someone else in the community has access. They can actually then pick up the maintenance of that and move on with it. Lots of nodding heads. We can all see that's a good thing. They're good guys. Okay. I'm going to overrun. But onto the demo. Because it's my show, so tough luck, you're stuck. It's a fairly quick demo. So back to fork, and on to step 4. And back to code. Okay, so SQL files. This is why I like to have them in a separate file, because you'll see that I've started to get other folders down here, like tools and the build.cake, which is ominous. So the only difference I've made here is I've added a new up file to seed the pet name. Remember last time? I'll show you it. Oh no, you can't actually see it. Names were empty. So now you can see I want to update all the pet names. Yes, it's rubbish SQL for this. Yeah, let's have a look. The other addition I've got in here then is build.cake. So this is a Cake script. You start off with tools and add-ins. So I've added Grate, actually it's 174 these days, and then add in package cake.grate. So that is me. That is the thing that I built, and I'm pulling it out of NuGet and saying I want version 173. I decided in cake.grate to match the same version numbers as Grate itself, so that you know if you call cake.grate this version it supports and has been tested by me on that version of Grate. You can pass arguments into it. This one's always in there, target, default, and that's because what you then have down here is you have these tasks. And so these tasks are effectively functions that will run inside, or if you like, deployment steps. So this one's fairly straightforward. I've only got 2 tasks. And when it comes up here and says target, it says which task you want to run. So I've got one called database. Don't know why I'm looking at there. I've got it locally here. And I've got one called default. And then it just says run target at the end. There is another way to do this. So this will run on SQL. This will run on Windows or on Linux. There is a thing called cake frosting. So if you don't want to have, a .cake script, and you prefer just to stick with .NET, you can create a .NET Core console application. and you can add in cake frosting, and you can do all the same sort of stuff and the same syntax inside your program rather than inside a script. I don't know why they do that, but some people like it that way. There's bound to be a good reason for it. I don't know why the diagnostic failed, I don't know. Okay, there's my commands. So the first thing I need to do for is, did I delete the tool manifest? I think I did. So I'm going to start from scratch. Tool manifest. No, I didn't. Expecting it there. Actually, it's this one I want to delete, isn't it? No, I want that. Delete that. So effectively, I'm installing Grate. Create a new tool manifest. And then this. Now this is the bit I'm a little nervous because a few times when I was running this, testing it. So this is me installing cake.tool. Again, I'm running it as a .NET tool. You don't have to run it as a .NET tool. There's lots of ways of running it. So far so good. And let's test cake. So I'm just going to run .NET Cake. I'm not going to pass any variables in. And what that will do, cross your fingers. I hate it when it takes a long time, but it's got download tools. We should get a message. Sometimes when I run this, it, PowerShell, I think it's PowerShell or Terminal, no, it's PowerShell, put itself knickers in a twist and remembered too much of what I'd done previously with Grate. Said, you can't do that. That is taking a lot longer time to do. Thank God for that. There we go. So we have run Grate. We have run Cake. So it just says default hello world or hello cake. That's because in my build script here, under the target up here was target default. I didn't specify a target, so the default ran, which just runs this and it outputs just a print screen. Hello cake. So move on to this. Can you see that well enough there? This is my task. So because I put the plugin, it means there's a function called Grate. That's the thing that I wrote in the extension. I've specified Grate settings, which is the standard way of doing things in Cake. So I've given it a connection string, same as we saw before. I've given it a version, same as we saw before. And a sync file directory, same as we saw before. The only difference here is I've turned silent on. So all that does is it stops that section that says, are you sure you want to do this? Press enter if you do. So it just takes that out, which obviously you don't want that in your pipeline. Because that will just run. So, let's run that. I'm going to copy and paste the command just to be sure. So that is the command, .NET Cake, target, deploy database. Oh, that's not what I want to do either. Do that. So it's Grate's already installed, so hopefully that'll be a bit faster. There we go. And we're running deploy database. And there we go. All the same output as we had before from Grate. I have done a thing where you can set the verbosity in Cake to say how much, do you want it debug, do you want it information, do you want it silent, that sort of stuff. I've tried to sync that with, there's a similar verbosity in Grate. So, it's done it. Same messages, all the same stuff. If we go into the database, and I run that, hopefully you'll expect it. We've now got pets' names. You can't see them if you're in the room. And again, you can't see them, but there are there's a new version, which is 0.3.0, as you would expect with all the other stuff. And so that was it. 2 simple tools plugged together by me. I've got one more slide to show you, and then I'll take any extra questions. Those displays, keep changes. You see that? That is a little too small, really, isn't it? Yeah, live editing. Just make that bigger. Okay, formatting looks awful, but you'll be able to see it better, at least. So that is Grate, cakebuild.net, and that is me. That's the bit that I put in place. And that's it. That wasn't too bad, 5 minutes over. Any questions?
Did you Sorry, I might have missed it. Did you put the version of 0.3 in, or did the auto version last time?
Did you put what, sorry?
When you versioned it to 0.3, did you put that in, or did the auto version?
It does an auto version, but so if you see here, you can't see that because, alright, okay, this is where things get difficult. Let's do this. I've specified the version here, okay? Now, Cake is pretty good, so you can either say, okay, pass a version through on the command line, or you can say, Cake, generate me a version using whatever you want it to do. So you could actually build that version, but obviously,
Yeah.
what else?
What, crypto miner? What, you knew the package?
Just, it might be off topic, but how would you debug that? So you've got your Cake script, you've got something that's running it. Can you debug that? Because I couldn't figure out how you debug that. Is that why you have the content? That's why you have cake frosting and so on. You can debug it there.
You can't debug the Cake script itself, but what you can do is at the top here, where I've said here, pull in Grate, you can download the Grate repository, the cake.grate repository, sorry, and have that running locally, and then you can point this, I can't remember the exact syntax of it, you point this at that folder and say use that added in my local folder, and then you stick a breakpoint in your in Visual Studio, for example. So I have a plugin running in Visual Studio, and I take a breakpoint. How do I debug the script itself?
Well, it's only what you said. Cake, you can slice it up and then you can
I have
do
a
exactly
feeling.
your task. And I was like, I don't know how you do that unless you put it in a console app.
I mean, I've got to be honest, I was less sure when I said that than about everything else. You could put it in the console app and debug it. I'm pretty sure there's a way of debugging the actual script itself, but exactly how, mind you, the look on your face tells me I've Googled this and I haven't found an answer.
Well, it's
So about that stuff.
The PowerShell script by default runs that Cake script.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So you can't. Well,
You can. Well, it does hook up. Like for example, if you want to debug a plugin that you've got in Visual Studio, you do have to set up. I haven't done it for years. In fact, it was in Foreman that I last did it. I was able to debug the actual script that was running. Sorry, the plugin that was added to it, and it tells it hook onto this process and all the rest of it. But exactly how? I think actually it's one of those things where you say run in debug mode, and it'll pause and it'll say what process do you want to attach to, and then you go in Visual Studio and say right, attach to this process ID, and then the way it runs. I think there's something along those lines. Michael.
well, I was going to say that's what you end up
You can,
doing. Like, what's my actual parameter for this part of the script? You know?
That's still better than
Yeah.
Python itself.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and you can put information logs out and all the rest of it. Classic old JavaScript debugging thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm sure there's a meeting where
It should be better than that. Yeah.
Thanks.
No.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Cheers, mate. Any other questions? No. Great stuff. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.